So welcome everyone. We are kicking off Monday, March 14th, our Meet the California Squad series, where we will be interviewing California Working Family Party endorsed candidates who are running for state legislature. And really excited today to be kicking off this series with a very good friend, but someone who has been a progressive legislative champion for us in Sacramento since 2017, when he won in an upset election, beating a moderate Democratic candidate in the San Jose, Santa Clara region in November of 2016. And since then has been kicking ass for us on a wide variety of legislation, from criminal justice to single payer healthcare and environmental justice. And so, Assemblymember Ash Kalra, thank you so much for joining us. You are the first Indian American elected to serve in California, and one of our few, unfortunately for now, working family champions up in Sacramento. And I know that we are working to change that this upcoming cycle. We have almost a third of the state legislature opening up this year, close to 40 open seats. This is an unprecedented moment in California where we can really impact our policy agenda for the next decade. With the 12-year term limits this upcoming year. And so I just want to start out, first of all, with some light questions, and then we'll go deeper. And then we're gonna end with a lightning round. So first question, coffee or tea?
Oh, 100% coffee. And I know as someone who's Indian, to not say chai is somewhat blasphemous, but I think I grew up and it was overload. And so when I first tried coffee, probably when I was in college, I started drinking coffee, and yeah, it's been coffee ever since.
So I don't drink coffee. I have never drank coffee. I somehow managed a 6-campaign election cycle without caffeine, but I'm a big tea drinker. So I have matcha tea in my cup, and I'm actually rocking a mug from a friend who owns a coffee company, actually, called BRL Coffee out in New York City. He's a DJ out there. I don't hate it here. I love it here, but I love it. All right, so tell us a little bit about yourself for our audience that may not be as familiar with who you are.
Yeah, I was born in Canada, but I grew up in San Jose since I was 6 years old. Went to public schools down there, graduated from Oak Grove High School. Then went on to community college at De Anza, UC Santa Barbara, and then law school at Georgetown. But all the while, my goal, generally speaking, was to find a way to do public service. And more specifically, as I graduated from law school in DC, decided I wanted to be a public defender, and worked there for 11 years. And it's still core to who I am and how I serve. And it is still the best job I've ever had. I loved that job. And but ultimately, my path has been set by kind of trying to find out how I can reduce suffering in this world, in my community. And that's why I chose to leave that job I loved to run for city council, and now here in the assembly, still trying to bring those same values and principles that and life experience I learned as a public defender to my work as an elected official.
So, as you know, California WFP has made it its mission to make our state legislature sexy. We want everyone to want to run for state legislature. We want everyone to want to pay attention to the state legislature. We want folks to be volunteering and voting, and uplifting these elected offices is one of the most critical for our state. And you've heard me say this, you know all the facts. The state legislature passes 3 times as many bills as US Congress on any given election cycle. And on some of the most pressing issues that we spent a lot of our time talking about on the left, whether it's access to reproductive health, to public schools, to Medicare for all, and environmental justice and criminal justice reforms, this work is really actually happening at the state level across our 50 states, less so on the federal level. And so my next question is, what is the sexiest thing about the California state legislature that no one knows about?
Oh my goodness! I think, and this is a very wonky answer, but I think it's sexy because I love the work. Is that it's actually you can, like you mentioned it, like about how significant it's the second most powerful seat of government in the country. Coming from city council where things especially because I was in the political minority there, it was hard to get things done. I think it's really sexy how someone can just have an idea, a community member, an activist, and come to you and say, I have this idea, and literally in a year it can become law. That can happen in California. It can happen in a lot of other places, especially not progressive policies. But I guess that doesn't sound sexy to folks, but to me it's really sexy because I found it really, I found the opposite work. I found it dull and difficult. Not that this work's not hard, it's just that I think it's so cool when you can get something done like that. That's a priority. But again, that sounds kind of like a corny answer, not so sexy. But Sacramento is becoming a more sexy town. It's a lot more fun up here, a lot more restaurants and bars and people out and about. And so that's actually a good thing about it being my second home too.
I'm actually going to skip ahead. A lot of folks don't really know what it entails to serve, but actually one of the biggest parts of serving on the state legislature is how you get to Sacramento.
Yeah.
It takes up a lot of folks' time. So tell us a little bit about your commute.
Yeah, I mean, it's about a 2-hour commute when I'm driving. It's about 3 hours if I take the train. And I've been unfortunately driving more than I like to because rather than taking the train because I have to come back and forth to take care of my dad. But 2 hours isn't bad. Usually you go up one day, like on a Monday morning, and you come back Thursday afternoons. So it's not like an everyday commute under ordinary circumstances. So it's a lot better for us than those that are from LA that have to fly and you get in an airplane every week back and forth, or folks like in the Central Coast that or other parts that have to drive 3 or 4 hours. But it is a real toll. I'm not married, I don't have kids, but for those that are and have kids, and I can see how it's so challenging. I'm finding my own challenge with my dad, but it's not to the same scale as someone that might have 2 or 3 little kids at home and they fly back and forth in the middle of the week so they can spend time with their family. So it is a sacrifice in that sense on a personal level, but I certainly find it well worth it.
What's the craziest commute to Sacramento amongst your colleagues?
So I always thought it was someone like way down south or up north, but I had heard until Santa Barbara started a direct flight to Sacramento, it was the folks there. Because if you think about Monique Limon or Steve Bennett, before that flight, and I think that flight's not always available, so they still have to do this. They have to drive from Santa Barbara all the way to Burbank and then fly to Sacramento. And you think about the amount of time that takes to get there an hour ahead, get on a plane. And so I think that they probably rival the longest commute as far as I know. So the Central Coast folks are in a really challenging spot. They're not close enough to an airport that until Santa Barbara started doing. I think when they go back on Thursday afternoons, I think there's a flight that takes them back.
So you have colleagues that drive 2 or 3 hours just to get to an airport to then get on a plane to get to Sacramento.
That's right.
I think that people don't realize what a huge sacrifice it is to serve on our state legislature and the work that folks have to do and still be grounded in their district and in relationship with their constituents locally. So you talked about what you find sexy about the state legislature, and I already warned everyone that this was going to be an exciting conversation between two incredibly boring policy models. So let's dive into policy. What are you most proud of accomplishing over your last 5 years in the state legislature since you joined in December of 2016?
I'm proud of a lot. I mean, it's hard. It's like choosing your children. I've had about 40 bills signed into law, and people know that I do pretty bold bills. Like with my colleagues, they know that if I approach something like, okay, here comes another Kalra bill. But there's a few. I think the Racial Justice Act is landmark legislation to root out both not just explicit but implicit racial bias in our criminal justice system. It's considered landmark legislation, essentially as a state overturning the McCleskey v. Kemp decision from the 80s that most people went to law school learned about, that said that even though the death penalty is racist, you really can't do anything about it unless you can show explicit racism. Bottom line is, look it up, the California Racial Justice Act, because this year we're trying to make it retroactive. AB 256, and I'm very proud of that work. We got it done the first year of the pandemic. No one thought, we were stunned in a good way that we were able to get it signed into law. And so that one I'm very proud of for sure. The right of return for hotel workers, although the governor vetoed it, it was such a proud movement to be part of, to be able to get it to the governor's desk during the pandemic. I love our hotel workers, and it was really such a powerful movement. It ended up being adopted the following year in the budget with working with our Lorena Gonzalez, who's now going to be the head of our labor fed. But that one, that shows that even a bill that wasn't successful, how powerful it was and how much it moved people. And of course, single payer. I think that we got single payer healthcare further than anyone ever expected. In the 25 years of single payer legislation, I'm the first legislator to ever put forward a funding plan. I think that was significant, and the work with the nurses was tremendous, and the activists. And I just think that there's obviously a lot more work to do on it. But I think that we should be proud of what we were able to do in a very challenging, again, COVID year.
That brings me to my next question, which is, what would have been different if we had elected a squad in Sacramento over the last 5 years? A progressive squad that was leading on our agenda for California. And what do you think it'll take to pass single payer healthcare here in California?
Well, I mean, I'll start with the second point. I think it just, I think we're very close. I think it's going to take time and more progressive members. And I think we're on the right path for both. I think this time next year, we'll have at least a handful, if not more, progressive legislators that are already campaigning. Many are corporate free already as they campaign. So you add that on top of the vacancies we had. So we're already building a lot of momentum. And then with some of the legislators that weren't quite there yet, I think we have time to get them there. And we've seen that on major legislation where a legislator may not be at one moment prepared to vote on something, but when they learn more about it, they see the momentum building, they see more of their colleagues on board, then you can get them on board. And so I think it's very doable. I think it's very doable even next year. And I think it's important, not just, if you think about our climate change goals, healthcare, labor rights, and we need to have more unapologetic progressives that are prepared, to put their kind of values where their mouth is in terms of action, right? And so I think it's incredibly important for us to get more corporate-free legislators, to get more legislators that are very clear as they're campaigning on where they stand, so that when we see this turnover, we have a huge turnover over the next 2 election cycles. This year is going to be more than anyone expected. And so I think that there's a huge opportunity, not just next year, but in the 2 years after, to add significant number of progressive legislators, probably double or triple the number of corporate free from the 2 right now to many more. And I'm very excited about that, because ultimately, I think that brings the power back to the people.
So on Saturday, when we were at the kickoff for James Pullman for Assembly, it came up that there are only 2 members of the entire state legislature that are corporate free. Yourself and Assemblymember Alex Lee, who's also joined us on IG Live.
Yeah.
Assemblymember Lee, thanks for joining us here today. What could have been different over the last 4 years if we had more corporate free candidates? Are there examples that you can think of legislation that we might have passed that was close, but we didn't quite get there? If voters were paying more attention to these races and putting forward candidates that really represented us and not just special interests like oil and insurance and utility companies in Sacramento. And by the way, I should also note that Hayward City Councilwoman Aisha Wahab, who's running for state senate and is a part of our California squad, has also joined us. Thank you, Councilwoman, for joining us. What would be different if we had more folks like Aisha and Alex and James on the state legislature over the last?
I'll start with the kind of the first part of your question. Well, I'll say this: there are a number of our colleagues that are incredibly progressive that may not be corporate free. Mark Stone, for one, he's just said he's not going to be running again. He is arguably the most progressive member over the last 5 years, more so than anyone in the legislature. So it's not, there's a lot of factors involved. I think certainly being corporate free is one of them, but we do have some very strong progressives in the legislature. The question as to how much better it can get is hard to say, because it's always a matter of context. Who are you substituting? Whose voice are you substituting in place of that legislator? But there's no doubt in my mind that we'd be in a better place. And Aisha is an example. I think her race is critical for the future of our legislature, because it's a very clear contrast. I think my race was a very clear contrast. Alex Lee's is a very, so when you get those clear contrasts, that's where it makes a big difference. When it's very clear, you have, and Aisha's race is an example. You have a more corporate Dem who's very viable against a very viable progressive. We need to get by, and I think the progressive movement, and I think great credit to Working Families Party for starting to put this emphasis on legislatures and city councils and other types of seats, because for far too long, the emphasis has been on Congress, the White House, the US Senate. And the reality is, as you mentioned in your intro, work is getting done in the capitals, especially in California, where a lot of the work we do then gets copied by other states or by the nation's capital. They're looking to what we're doing constantly. So the short answer is it makes a huge difference for us to be able to get folks in Sacramento that can help. It's one thing to say, okay, your voting record is good. It's another to be a champion. So we have a lot of folks that have a great voting record, and we have a number of champions. We just need more. And so I'm proud of some of the champions we have on our Progressive Caucus. And I think we can grow that and be even more effective and powerful.
Yeah. You know, one of the things I remember when I served on the San Francisco Board of Supervisors is that it's often hard to distinguish between electeds based on voting record, because by the time something hits the floor for a full vote, all the compromises have been made in advance. So there's often no distinction. Often, you know, it's a unanimous vote for a policy because we got into a place where enough colleagues are ready to support a measure and pass it. But what you miss in that process is the amendments, right? So we may have watered down legislation protecting undocumented residents of San Francisco, but folks don't see all of the changes that we had to make in advance of the full floor vote. So then what you see at the end is a unanimous vote, but there's not the same level of accountability that you can pride on some of the more moderate colleagues that pushed amendments to weaken that legislation. So I think, you know, that's one of the things that I think is really important in electing a squad, is that the outcome may look similar, but you may get stronger legislation that more greatly protects tenants or more greatly protects residents that live within a mile of an active oil field.
Yeah.
And, you know, honestly, that's something that surprised me in the Bay Area, is that I did not realize that 15% of Californians live within 1 mile of an active oil field in this liberal state that talks about how climate change is real. We're the 7th largest oil producing state in the country. And the state legislature couldn't pass a simple bill to create a buffer, a 1 mile buffer between active oil wells and schools and residential homes.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of many pieces of legislation where, you know, I think that people presume that California legislatures it's like a no-brainer. But there's a lot of examples like that bill and many others. Like last year, we had Lorena Gonzalez with the fast food workers bill, right? Couldn't get that through. Now we're working on it this year to continue to push it forward. You think it's a no-brainer. We've had legislation on plastic.
Yeah. Because everyone's familiar with the fast food bill.
Talk about that one?
Yeah.
So it's to create a council, a sectoral council to actually set health and safety standards, wage standards, and what have you in the fast food industry. A notoriously difficult industry to unionize, but one that also empowers workers as well as franchise owners over the corporation that really has complete control over the work environment and the working conditions. We couldn't get a majority vote off the assembly floor. We were able to pass it in January as it was a 2-year bill, but it shouldn't have been that hard, right? And so there are plenty of examples. Plastic spill, trying to get plastics out of our supply chain. That's been very difficult, and we're still working on that this year with Laura Friedman and others. So there are plenty of examples where, you know, I think that the average person maybe are focusing on DC. Oh, DC needs to do this, that, and the other because they think California has already done it. In some cases, we have. In many cases, though, there's still a lot of work to do.
Mm-hmm. For example, California is great on voting rights and access to reproductive health.
Yeah.
And we spent a lot of time agonizing over the Supreme Court. But if we had 50 good state legislatures, we wouldn't need to be challenging, you know, access to reproductive health and abortion at the federal level. We could just rely on 50 good state legislatures to protect our citizens. And we know that the majority of US citizens support abortion.
Yep.
And so a focus on the state legislature is important, not just in California, but across the country.
Yeah.
So I know we're running close out of time. Tell us.
I'll take a couple. I'll take a couple lightning questions if you have them.
Okay. All right. Well, before we get to lightning questions, because we want to make sure that our audience knows that in order to win, it's not just enough to support folks on social media, but you actually have to get out there and walk and phone bank for our candidates.
That's right.
The way that we win is by reaching our neighbors door to door. I wanted you to start out telling us about a favorite door knocking or campaign story.
So
and you've had multiple cycles, so it can be.
You know, I mean, the most endearing one, and this happens, I think, to a lot of folks if they meet folks in their own culture, is if I knock on a door and there's an Indian uncle or auntie there, they inevitably invite me in for tea and will feed me. And that happened on more than one occasion. And by far, the best, experience is when, and it wasn't just with Indian families, it would happen. I was once invited to someone's backyard because they were having a birthday party and it was a Latino family and I had tacos and hung out with them. And so, that's just the best. I mean, when you actually meet people in a genuine way, those are definitely my favorite stories. I love that genuine kind of being brought into a family event or a family's home is the most, and certainly in our culture, it's the most special thing you can do. And so it makes you feel good that someone embraces you and brings you in like that.
It's amazing to be invited into people's homes. And it's amazing how many people do actually invite you in.
Yeah.
I've actually never missed door knocking in an election cycle in the last 10 years, since 2010. And it's one of my favorite things to do. But I don't love phone banking, but I love door knocking.
Me too. Me too.
And it was a lot of fun to go door knocking with you in 2020. We went to Hayward, we went to Sacramento, and we went to Arizona. I just want to encourage everyone to come out with WFP this year to door knock for our squad, so we can win in November 8th. All right, so let's go to the lightning rod. So this is going to be something that we're going to end with all of our candidates. Same set of lightning round questions. So starting out with, are you a morning or night person? Night,
100%. Always, even when I was younger.
Yeah, same with me. What song do you canvas campaign to get energized?
So I just listen to a lot of 90s hip hop. I mean, that always gets me going. And so, I'll listen to Wu-Tang or Tupac and all that.
Do you have a specific song?
Can't beat it. What was that?
Do you have a specific song?
I love Tupac, Picture Me Riding, and The Mystery of Chess Boxing by far is my favorite Wu-Tang song.
The song I campaign to in the mornings because I hate getting up in the mornings because I'm a night person. So, for those 6 a.m., 7 a.m. Public transit visibility, I always Triumph by Wu-Tang to wake me up.
Yeah. Picture Me Rolling by Tupac. I think I said Picture Me Riding. I can't mess up the name of the song. Anyway, go ahead.
What are you binging when you're not campaigning?
So I've been watching a lot of the Korean horror, zombie stuff. I just saw All of Us Are Dead. I also saw 3%, which is a Brazilian one. I like the post-apocalyptic type things. Yeah. And so I watched some of that stuff.
Favorite vegan spot in your district? By the way, I don't think our audience knows that Assemblymember Kalra is a vegan. Yeah. So
I'm actually the only one in the legislature right now. Isn't that crazy?
You're the only vegan in the state legislature.
Yeah. And so a lot of spots, there's tons of really good Vietnamese spots that are a lot of run by Buddhists and all that make incredible replicas of pho, bún bò Huế, and all those dishes. So they're amazing. So there's a number of them, and they're not too hard to find throughout the district. I love downtown. There's Good Karma, which has great beers. My dad and I were just there Saturday night, as well as Pizza Flora right down the street, which is vegan pizza. Vegetarian House on Santa Clara Street near downtown as well. Happy Hooligans, comfort food. Get their Reuben sandwich. It's in West San Jose. Vegan Veganos taco shop, taco truck. And then there's also a vegan donut shop on Santa Clara Street as well. That's just a quick sampling.
Wow, vegan donuts and vegan Reuben sandwiches.
Yeah.
Well, when I'm walking for you and Assemblymember Alex Lee, I'm going to have to check out those spots. All right. So everyone wants to know in the Bay Area, A's or Giants as a San Jose native?
Okay, so my answer is San Jose Giants. We have a Class A ball team here. We do. That's our home team is the San Jose Giants. I saw your look like I'm cheating or something. No, that was a correct answer. And the San Jose Sharks and the San Jose Earthquakes. It's got to have San Jose in the front.
All right. You can get away with that. Go-to karaoke song.
Oh, I do a lot of 80s rock. I do like Wanted Dead or Alive. I do Bob Marley, Get Up, Stand Up. And yeah, a lot of classic rock and once in a while like a 90s like hip hop or R&B song. But Wanted Dead or Alive is definitely, and Billy Idol songs are definitely go-tos.
We're going to have to do a karaoke event.
Oh yeah.
On Zoom. Worst job you've ever had?
The worst? This one doesn't count. I'm just kidding. I love being an assembly member. I'm just kidding. No, I would say, I don't know about worst job. I've liked every job I had, but when I was working at the dining commons in Santa Barbara, washing dishes, scrubbing pots, that was probably the most work I did. I mean, those plates and big pots bigger than me, they never stop. So you just got to keep grinding. And so that was probably the hardest working job I had.
Yeah. But I imagine that discipline and ethic has continued to carry through in your work as a legislator and as a candidate.
Yeah. I mean, I think that you just find a way to, that was part of the way to help pay for college, and you just find a way to keep doing what you got to do. But those life experiences, like, those are the things you remember when you're thinking about working people, you're thinking about policies, you think about the people that you're working side by side with,
All right. So final question. If every app was to suddenly disappear from the world, but 3, which 3 would you keep?
Wow, that's really tough. I would say, well, probably Twitter, because I just get probably most of my news and keep up to date with stuff on Twitter. Right now, probably TikTok. I love TikTok. It's so mind, you just get away. It's so entertaining. But I also learn a lot from it, actually. And so I'd say TikTok, Twitter, and I'm not sure what a third is, but I don't know.
One more. You only get one more app on your phone. Everything else is gone.
I guess I'll say Instagram. I like tracking my friends, their families, what they're up to, and seeing their kids' baby pictures, whatever, stuff like that. It's cool. Travel pictures.
We got the social media candidate right here.
Yeah.
Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. It's amazing how hard this question is, especially for folks that are as old as us that remember probably 6-7 years ago when there really weren't any apps.
That's right.
And now we can't live without, more than 3. Okay, I lied. We had one more question. This is really the final question. Tell us one thing you love about California.
Oh, the weather. You kidding me? I mean, it's when I travel around and go play. I mean, we take it for granted way too much, even when we had our cold streak for like a couple of weeks. But absolutely, the weather, especially being in San Jose, it's the best.
All right. Thank you, Assembly Member. I know you actually need to go to committee now. So appreciate you joining us quickly for lunch. Everyone, please join our Instagram and Twitter on California Working Families Party. Check out our squad. Our next interview is going to be with Cudahy Mayor Elizabeth Alcantar, who is running for assembly in the county of Los Angeles. She'll be on later this week. She is 28 years old and doing incredible work locally, and we're so excited to be supporting her as a part of our squad. Assemblymember Kalra, thank you again for joining us.
DJ all I do is win, 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 no matter what. Got money on my mind, I can never get enough. And every time I step up in the building, everybody hands go up, and they stay there.